What do we know about Jesus? We know some things about Jesus. One of the things that we don't know is that the Bible does not give any indication of what Jesus looked like, what color his hair was, or his eyes. And we all have our own ideas, I guess, of how it is that we are, that we know that what Jesus looks like to us. Don't you all have an idea in your mind when you think of Jesus? Don't you have this picture that kind of presents itself? I know I do. And even though we don't know anything about his physical presence, we do know one thing very, very well, and that is that Jesus was totally human and he was totally divine. Totally human. Totally human. He ate, he drank just like we do. And he was even, there's a place in the Bible where it says he was a drunkard and a glutton. Well, he lived life fully, obviously. So, and we don't know if that might have been somebody that was saying, that might have been somebody that didn't like him, said that. We don't know that for sure. But anyway, there are some indications as to what Jesus was like. And they're pretty amazing if you really begin to look at it. And we can find some clues into what made Jesus truly unique. What was it that made him truly unique? We know that he was human. We know that he was divine. Well, we're human and divine too. But what was different about Jesus was that he fully acknowledged it. He fully knew it. And he acted from that space of full knowing and full knowledge. Reading the Gospels, we begin to get a glimpse into his personality. And if we looked at Carl Jung, he has several criteria for measuring a person's personality. And using this criteria, a picture of Jesus begins to emerge. We begin to see Jesus as a real person and how he had developed his personality in his life. So again, I'm basing this book on John Sanford's book, The Kingdom Within. First, we're going to look at introvert and extrovert. Now, Jesus spoke to large crowds. He definitely knew how to draw a crowd. And an extrovert's center of interest and sense of personal identity is found in the world outside of themselves. Someone who has, energized crowds of people is certainly an extrovert. And introverts ultimately measure their values by what is taking place within. What is taking place within them. And their chief interest and sense of identity lies within the inner world. And Jesus' introvertism was equally developed. In Mark 4, Jesus spent 40 days in solitude in the wilderness. Can you imagine an extrovert doing that? Not too likely. Not too likely. That really means that he was pretty equally introvert and extrovert from this appearance. The second set of categories that we're going to look at, and I'm really just touching the surface of all of this morning, is that Jung describes wholeness as 4 functions of the psyche. Jung says the ego orients itself to life by means of 4 basic psychological functions. 2 of these functions are thinking and feeling. They are opposites, and they have to do with arriving at conclusions. 2 others, sensation and intuition, have to do with perception or the gathering of information. Now, as you can see up here, thinking and feeling, they are, in a sense, opposites, because thinking is looking to the outer world for your answers. Feeling is looking within. Sensation, on the other hand, and intuition are also ways of looking at things. And in sensation, what we're doing is we are looking at things, we are solving problems in the outer world. And Intuition is when we go within and we just know something. You know how it is when you just know and you know that you know? And so these are the four things places that we actually function from. And as we function from these places, we pick and choose in a way, but most of us are dominant in one or the other of them. And often one is dominant in opposition to the other. So thinking people are, they're really best at, while they're dealing with situations that can be resolved through abstract thought. And the feeling type person, on the other hand, is really quite comfortable with feeling life to arrive at an accurate and meaningful value judgment. So here we are. We've got two different ways of looking at things. In the sensation type, people are ordinarily very practical, very much aware of the information of their senses, and they are oriented to the business of practical living. They're the down-to-earth people, And they are a contrast to the intuitive. The intuitive function brings information from the inner world, the world of shadows and intangibles. The intuitive function is often defined as unconscious perception, just knowing the possible results of a certain set of circumstances. Both sensation type and intuition types are strong on perceiving. They just perceive from different places. Sensation from the outer, intuition from the inner. The intuitive type perceives the subtler, more elusive facts of relationship or the psyche in the inner realm. The sensation type perceives facts brought by the physical senses. Now, we all have different psychological functions that we have developed within our personality. And as a result of that, do we have any wonder as to why we all see things differently? You see it in your family. You can't understand why your sister thinks that. You can't believe your son is doing this. It's all a matter of looking at the different areas of your life, and you can see it. You see it in your family, you see it in your workplace, you see it in politics. It's everywhere. And so we begin to start to look at the different functions so that we know what to develop in our own personalities so that we can actually relate to the most people. This was just a brief overlook at this complicated but rich part of psychology. So let's look at Jesus and see where he fits into these four functions. The sensation, or so-called reality function, brings us information about the facts of our world. In Jesus, we see a man who was well developed in the sensation side. In Jesus, we can see that he had an acute awareness of the facts of the world in which he lived. In his teachings and in his parables, he used everyday examples like the grain of a mustard seed, which we used in our talk last week. And he also knows who has the power and how the power structure of his time works. So he's very savvy when it comes to the world. No one would have thought him as unrealistic or impractical. When the taxes were due, and the disciple came to him and said, "We have to pay the taxes. Do we really need to do this? I mean, aren't we kind of outside of that?" And Jesus said, "No, you have to pay the taxes. Go out and catch a fish, and you'll find a coin in its mouth, and you go pay the taxes." And we all know, probably, that there was really no coin in the fish's mouth, that was an idiom saying, "Go sell the fish and get the money." And so this was a thing that, Jesus was very practical. He was a very practical person. His intuitive function was equally well developed. And this is clear from his use of images and immediate contact with the inner world. His use of images and his sensing of reality, not visual to the senses, but known to the inner vision. He went within. John 2:22-24 says, "But Jesus knew them all and did not trust himself to them. He never needed evidence of any man. He could tell what a man had in him." His intuition was highly functioning. The thinking function of Jesus is seen in his intellectual bouts with the Pharisees, and when confronted with a situation that called for a quick, logical analysis and objective and keen thought, Jesus met the challenge with both the intuitive, the feeling, the thinking, and the feeling functions. I'm going to read a passage from Mark 2 that has all of these functions in this one place that he has used, and I want you to listen carefully and see if you can pick out the different ones as we go. This takes place in Capernaum, and Jesus is teaching in a house. And it's a very full house. In fact, people are waiting outside. They can't even get in. And it takes place in Capernaum where it said that was Jesus' home. Maybe he felt that was his home. So it begins. "And many were gathered together, so that there was no longer room for them, not even about the door. And he was preaching the word to them, and they came, bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. And when they could not get near him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and when they had made an opening, they let down the pallet on which the paralytic lay. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'My son, your sins are forgiven.' Now, some of the scribes were sitting there questioning in their hearts, 'Why does this man speak thus? It is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but for God alone?' And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they had thus questioned within themselves, said to them, 'Why do you question this in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven? Or to say, rise up, take your pallet and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sin.' He said to the paralytic, 'I say to you, rise, take up your pallet, and go home.' And he rose, and immediately took up the pallet and went out before them all, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, 'We never saw anything like this.'" Did you see all of the 4 that he used? The picture we get is of a man who is well developed in all 4 functions. The development of both the masculine and the feminine potentials in a person is also important to wholeness. The masculine aspect of the personality may be variously described as ongoing reason, active creativity, controlled aggressiveness, psychological firmness, and the capacity to strive for goals and overcome obstacles en route. The feminine aspect of personality comprises of the capacity for relationship, understanding, awareness of others, creativity through the receptiveness, an indirect way of attaining goals, patience, compassion, and the valuing and nourishing of life. Every man and woman has the potential for both the masculine and the feminine within. And it's important that we have both. We need them both. Without both of them, we are not brought into wholeness in that area of our life. A person who has developed only the masculine area may be brutal rather than aggressive, and may be intellectual in a sterile academic way. In the case of Jesus, there is a balance between the masculine and the feminine. On the masculine side, Jesus is a fighter. He carried the battle resolutely to his enemies, and through his struggle was spiritual, even though his struggle was spiritual rather than physical. You remember how he argued with the Pharisees, and he didn't shy back from it. He told them exactly how it was. He told them that they needed to get beyond where they were of just simply following the laws and following the rules, and come into the spirit of what they were, so that they might recognize the Spirit of God within themselves. His cleansing of the temple is a good example of controlling aggression. His capacity for clear communication and his dialogues with the Pharisees and his teachings were immediately recognized as having authority. In the feminine, we find that unlike John the Baptist, Jesus was a friend of women. In fact, there isn't anything found in the Synoptic Gospels that says that he had any women as enemies at all. And he was close to children also, an indication of good feminine development. Here too, in the masculine-feminine development, we find a man who is whole, who is fully developed in both areas. Another development of wholeness is that of a strong ego. That is, a conscious personality capable of showing up effectively in life. We've often thought that we had to get rid of our ego. And often we think someone is egotistical who has really, truly a weak ego, and they are compensating. But there are many, many things that go into this that I simply can't go into now. But a person with a strong ego is able to cope with, adapt to, and overcome life situations. And aren't we all in life situations? We need a strong ego to be able to work through that and to be able to move through it. A person with a weak ego is not able to cope with life, and it is a substitute that erects defenses and relies on various neurotic devices. So out of this comes egocentricity, which is so dangerous to the relationship with God. So we don't want to go there. The strength of Jesus' ego is apparent in his capacity to conceive of and carry through his extremely demanding life task. Only the person with a strong ego can give up that ego to God. The figure of Jesus going alone to the cross for the sake of his mission is the figure of a man with tremendous ego strength. But the ego strength is not egotism. Someone with a strong ego can live for the higher will within, turning his or her life over to a power still stronger than the human will. This we see in Jesus in his complete dedication to fulfilling his mission. When I think of this, I am so moved. In fact, at first service I was moved to tears. I was thinking of Jesus and the commitment that he made, and I was thinking of us who find it hard to meditate for 10 minutes in the morning. And I was thinking what it was that was in him that brought together all of this, all of these parts of this personality, so that he might come to earth and teach us to do what he did, so that we might know our true strength, our true power, so that we might know that we too are to do the things that he did. Jesus had the will. He surrendered to the higher will. And he was completely dedicated. So looking at the Gospels psychologically reveal the personality of a whole person. Jesus of Nazareth is the paradigm of the whole person, the prototype of all human development, and a truly individualized person. But most of all, he was aware of his spiritual reality, and he demonstrated it for us. He was willing to die to get his point across. Therefore, he was unique. Each one of you is unique. Each one of you has a huge gift to give to the world. We each know what it is. We sometimes say we don't know what it is because we don't want to make the commitment. But my friends, we have to make this commitment. We have to make it now. We can't wait any longer. It's ours to do. And I know that each one of you is working in your own way to bring forth the gift that you have brought to share with this world. God bless you for that. I honor you for it. Thank you.